Welcome back to Inside the Wolf's Den with your hosts, Sean and Joni Wolfswinkle. Today we have a special guest with us, Mr. Eddie Speed, also a good friend of ours. How are you today, Eddie?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Great, very good. Thank you so much for joining us. So just a little brief bio on Eddie. Since 1980, Eddie Speed has dedicated his professional life to the seller financing and non-performing note industry. Over the years, he has introduced innovative ideas and strategies that have positively impacted the way the industry operates today. Eddie founded Note School, which is a highly recognized training company specialized in teaching of buying both performing and non-performing discounted mortgage notes. He is the owner and president of Colonial Funding Group, LLC, which acquires and brokers discounted real estate secured notes. In addition, he also is a principal in a family of private equity funds that acquires bulk portfolios of notes. He has been a leader and an innovator in the note business for over 30 years. He will tell you that those 30 plus years have prepared him for the incredible opportunities of his current real estate market. So again, thanks Eddie for being here with us today. You have a wealth of knowledge in the real estate industry. Why don't you start out by talking a little bit about yourself, how you got started in the real estate industry? 30 years, wow.
Yeah, I started a long time ago. It was actually 1980, so it was, I got lucky. My wife, who and I will celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary in July.
Congratulations.
Her father was in the note business and was a traditional real estate investor, had really didn't do much flipping, but had lots of rentals. And then when the inflation got really high, then all of a sudden people were forced to carry seller financing because of high interest rates, 1980.
Sounds like it's happening again. But.
It very well could be. It very well could be. Yeah. So he introduced me to the business. And of course, it was just dumb luck for me. I didn't know what I was looking for. I think a lot of the people that are on your podcast, they've gone to some educational platform and they're seeking something, right? Mm-hmm. And but I would say that was back then, that wasn't as common. And I just was looking for something. Young guy, 20 years old, was looking something better than what I had. So that's how I got started.
Dude, and you've parlayed that because I know you've done so much. I've had the privilege of attending one of your events, 3-day events, and the wealth of knowledge that you and your wife both possess, because I know she's very, she knows her stuff when it comes to the note business. But I learned so much being even 20 years in the business, when it comes to creative financing, you always have a different spin on it. And what the biggest takeaway I had is you look at a transaction differently, and you are able to creatively come out with a different way of putting it together, whether it's buying it creatively or selling it. And so where does that come from, and can you share more about it? Sounds like you sit there and just come up with these creative ideas in your spare time.
Well, I've done a lot of volume. I've closed over 50,000 note deals. So I've seen a lot of deals. 50,000 deals we got to close on, that means I probably looked at 300,000 or 400,000 deals. And so I've gotten to see a lot of different ideas. And I may see a transaction, the buyer of the property got the seller to carry terms, and maybe he did 8 things okay, or maybe even kind of in a dumb way. But then he did 2 things that I'm like, oh my gosh, that was magic. And then you look at the next deal and the next deal and the next deal. And so all of a sudden you get to you feel like you get to be the best of the best, right? Mm-hmm. And you're right. At this point, it becomes a little bit with us, just to reach into your brain and remember history and what happened and that kind of thing. I have a theory about pretty much everything in real estate investing, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if we were just, like right now we say we have a shortage of properties, right? Mm-hmm. Well, we do have a shortage in properties, right? We have 850,000 houses listed, and we need 2 million, right?
Right.
But if we look at it the other way, it's like, well, well, could you buy 850,000 properties? And anybody would go, even Warren Buffett would go, no, probably not. Mm-hmm. So the deal is there's not a shortage of property. Sometimes there is a shortage of solving a problem. Mm-hmm. And so I always look at creative financing as simply like there's several generic things that I could tell you to do in structuring, very interesting terms. But the truth of the matter is it's really just me being conscious of the fact that for me to make the deal that somebody else can't make, many times I know I'm gonna have to solve a problem somebody else doesn't solve. Mm-hmm. And it's fun. I happen to love it.
Yeah.
And you still love it today. But let's take a step back. Can you just explain creative financing? Because it's not as common or hasn't been, the last several years. So just take us to the basics. What's creative seller financing? How do you look at it and just structure the deal? Because I don't think it's as often. When we got in the business 22 years ago, we did a lot of seller finance, but you don't see it as much anymore today.
No, it is. Well, I will give you an interesting number. There were $28 billion worth of seller finance notes created last year. Wow. So, and by the way, Texas is the number one market in the United States. 25% of that entire number of the dollar volume on the amount of seller financing was originated in the state of Texas. So it's very niche-y, but a lot of people just don't think they could use it. So let's just say that I find a piece of property for sale for $300,000. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the traditional thought is I'm going to write you a check for $300,000, assuming I'm okay with the price. I'm going to write you a check for $300,000, meaning I'm going to have a lot of money in my checking account, or I'm going to use some form of traditional lending, right? Mm-hmm. The traditional lending wouldn't be creative financing. It would just be financing. But let's just say for a minute that I didn't do it that way, right? Maybe you said, hey, I've owned this property for a long time now as a rental. I want to sell it, but the property has done really well and appreciated in value. Mm-hmm. And I say, okay, let's look at what maybe we can do. So you're saying what you really dread doing is paying the taxes on that profit. And you're like, yeah, that's probably true. And I'd say, okay, well, let me be ridiculous with you for a minute and let me go pay $310,000. Maybe a real estate investor, a discount buyer, maybe they don't want to be willing to pay $260,000. Mm-hmm. Well, see, we're pretty far apart at this point, mm-hmm. right? And then I say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go get a conventional mortgage, a first mortgage, and I'm going to put a first mortgage on the house, and you're going to get half your money today. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to structure it to where you get half of your money in the future. But what happens is I'm drastically going to affect your capital gains tax mm-hmm. because I'm going to push most of it out over a long period of time. So you get essentially a tax loophole of paying later. And of course, that's a way to do it. That's a institutional first, a seller second. And we're going to see a lot of that like in inflationary mm-hmm. times. Mm-hmm. I mean, I believe that's definitely going to be a thing, as you guys talked about before, when you started. Mm-hmm. So that's a way that I see that it's probably going to be used, and can be any combination of it. But here's the reality. So Eddie, tell me what creative financing is. Creative financing is structuring financial terms around a transaction that is different than how just paying cash or getting a traditional loan at a bank doesn't work, or it's better for you if you don't, right? And so the idea becomes from there, it's sort of a puzzle, right? And you just teach people how to find different strategies and kind of fit those puzzle pieces in. Mm-hmm. And you just basically talk to the seller and find out what's important to him. Now, we all know in negotiating and buying a property, you got to ask the right thing, right? So I believe the right thing, if I were dealing with somebody that had a rental, I'm thinking about maybe one of your clients or one of your friends that maybe they want to make it a rental. They're going to have it managed and they've got it in great shape, the way they're going to structure it. Mm-hmm. But the seller wants retail and they're going, it doesn't cash flow that well if I do retail. Mm-hmm. Or, it's like, what are the financings tied? Or maybe they've got too many loans at the bank, or maybe they're just like me and they're 62 years old and they're not going to sign a personal guarantee anymore for anything.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's all people have all different kind of reasons. And so I would start out probing the seller as to what made sense. So I would say, Joni, sounds like you've done really well with your rental. You bought at one price and you've rode the market up and you're going to sell at another price. Joni goes, yeah, that's it. Any negative factors that you can think of relating to that? And I'm going to see if she's going to pick it up. And if she's not, I'm going to help her pick it up. And basically what I'm then going to work into the conversation is, that capital gains is the only bad part about this deal. You got to pay taxes on the profits you've made. She goes, yeah, you're right. I know. Anybody ever tell you how you could defer your capital gains? Not pay them this year. In fact, you could pay them as much as 20 years in the future. And she would go, what? So Sean, you've heard me and I've been teaching this type of thing in some way for a long time. I mean, I set up the note system for home investors in 1992.
Wow.
Right. So I've been doing something like this a long time, but finally really listening a deeper level down to students or to the customers that we were trying to do something with, or just thinking about it. I figured out what I would do in creative financing is I would lead with the most important thing, which is there's essentially a tax loophole, an advantage to carry in terms that nobody would have thought of on their own. Now, once they carry the terms, the financing for me, all or part, then that's where my job is to be creative and structure things that are far more favorable than a bank or a professional lender would agree to. And they will. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's all about asking the right questions, right?
Well, it definitely is.
Yeah.
So we're with all that knowledge and all that experience, and you've rode several cycles. Where do you think the market is, and where do you think we're headed?
If Eddie had a crystal ball.
Yeah, I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Well, one of the largest house buyers in your fair city, who y'all know very well, has a voicemail into me right now about that very subject.
Yeah,
because he's got about a couple of hundred rental properties, and he's trying to figure out where the tea leaves are going. He's got a lot of other plays in the market. Well, I'll tell you this, you can't always take my advice, because what I would have sworn had to happen, and when the virus started, didn't happen. And so I've never lived through a pandemic before, and I've never seen things that have just gone so opposite as what was logical. But obviously we understand what happened. There was a lot of people pull their properties off the market, creating a shortage of listings, supply and demand, and all that good stuff. You just know what it leads to, correct?
Correct.
So here's the thing that I think. There is a lot more non-performing notes than people realize. A mutual friend of ours that's in a mastermind with us lives in Kansas City, in Oklahoma City, included me in a Facebook link last week, or he tagged me in a Facebook post, which I would just as soon he wouldn't have done, and I love him to death. The reason that I did cringe is because I find like I'm fighting some lady that's a realtor in Frisco, or I'm fighting somebody or they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
I know for a fact there's 1.9 million loans that are not making a payment today, and there's 750,000 loans in forbearance. 60% of those 750,000 loans applied for a modification, but the biggest majority, call it 70%, haven't made their first payment. Okay. Then the loans that didn't apply for a modification, they're just going to end back in the non-performing note pool. They didn't even apply for a modification. So the point is I do think that inventory can become very much affected by this. And obviously, everybody's looking at rates,
right,
and everybody's trying to do it. I believe that, to be honest with you, I think the real estate investor trying to acquire rentals, which is what you help guys do. And I think that you have a unique advantage, because a typical realtor that's trying to sell, properties to out-of-town investors, they are not going to know much about creative financing.
Right.
If you then applied some of the techniques where you're getting the seller to carry a second, he gets an advantage of, getting part of his money later, including part of his tax bill later, and you're getting some money today, then you can back into it and make the math better where it would cash flow, because rising rates and rising interest doesn't produce a lower payment. So there's a way to work it around. I mean, that's how people figured this stuff out, is in not perfect markets.
Correct. Yeah, it's been so long that I think people forgot.
Yeah.
I'm
getting excited just listening to you right now, because we used to do this back 10 years ago. So.
20 years ago. I mean, that's everything we did was creative, and it actually was. It brought more. It was fun. It was fun. Yeah. Anyway, in the last 10 years, it's been so transactional and just rinse and repeat.
And markets have cycles. I mean, I have stayed in the note business because I have so many different little angles that I could work. But I think for many people that I know, like you guys, years ago, you used to do it. And it was common. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Why was it common then?
The market, wasn't as hot, so there was at least 6 months worth of inventory. There was rates were in the 8s, 7s at that time. So that was the main reason. It was, people looked to it more. They couldn't go to the bank and get a loan for, 2 or 3%.
Right.
Like they have been. So it was just, and there was.
So you found the advantage in the fact that the way to compete against the fact that mortgage lenders either couldn't financially, meaning that the prevailing rates, or they couldn't because they didn't want to have deep underwriting.
Correct.
Right? Both of those equal what I would say is a void in conventional lending.
Correct.
And so seller financing filled that gap.
Correct. I mean, and we were 19, 20 years old. Like, we had zero credit. I couldn't go to a bank and get a loan at that time, but I had enough sales skills, or Joni did, that to convince the seller to sell it to us on terms. So that helped us. But
yeah. So we've never actually had an educator or investor on the show that specializes in notes and seller financing. So let's talk a little bit about your note school. What's your mission there? What do you teach?
Well, I'll give you a sense of why I started doing it, and it's continued to morph, but I think I still teach for the same reasons that I started. So I met the guy that founded HomeVestors, Ken D'Angelo, back in the 80s. I bought notes from him. And then he was franchising the house buying business, as you guys know. And so he came to me and he says, look, I don't believe any real estate investor can survive 20 straight years without having a deep understanding of creative financing. Sometimes the market's perfect. Sometimes he doesn't have to overcome those objections. Sometimes they're going to have to overcome those objections almost all the time. The market you guys just described, right? So I for years worked and set up the note system and did all the stuff and all the mechanics of it. And I bought from a lot of other well-known people that have been around in the market. My old pal, Mitch Stephen, lots of people that I really kind of helped get started in the note space, but they were creating notes over and over and over. And I was buying their notes. I was their exit. So I realized I didn't actually have a note school back then. It was teaching people how to do it, because if I didn't give them a formula, it wasn't fair to them to ask them to make up their own formula about something they didn't have a lot of experience with, which was how to sell notes in the secondary market. So I wrote the matrix and developed things and did stuff like that. And then when I started note school, I said, okay, I can do a lot of business with people once I teach them the framework. So if I taught them characteristics and underwriting and I gave them like a blueprint of what that would look like, then all of a sudden they could do it and not go out and make mistakes early in the game, which they're prone to do if somebody doesn't help them, right? No matter how seasoned you are in real estate. So that's where I started. And, I really built Note School with a hope and desire that, I could put, they used to call it the golden handcuffs on somebody, right? As long as you had a great service, a fair price, so forth and so on, then they want to go do business with you because you give them the most out of it, not just because you taught them something. Mm-hmm. So I always have been a guy that wanted to figure out how to, help them along so they could eventually we could do business together. And that's really what I still try to do today.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're about to see a big explosion or growth within Note School or your
for sure?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if rates keep moving up, people are going to have to figure out creative financing because they're just not going to take the math won't work if you don't put some creative financing in it, right? And there's all kind of things that people can do that would be, I believe that you and I have a lot of mutual friends in the business, and I have a lot of conversations with them about inflationary times. There's some people in our Facebook groups that have a lot of hot sports opinions about inflation. Mm-hmm. And I remind them, I said, well, how many people do you know that were involved in the business when inflation was the highest, right? Mm-hmm. And, well, I'm not sure. I said, well, one, because you know me.
Yeah.
Right.
So here's what I learned. When I was a young kid, they just taught me a strategy. I'm out calling on real estate investors and realtors. And this is like in 1980 and the early 80s, right? Mm-hmm. I'm out calling on people who's been in the business excessively longer than I've been. So were they more knowledgeable about real estate overall? They were. Here's what they didn't know. They did not understand how to solve the creative financing problem, and they were feeling desperate because the market was pounding them. Mm-hmm. So understand, I realized that people don't always need creative financing, but when the market gets crazy, particularly inflation and all the things that follow that, then you're going to have some creative twist to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joni and I really made for 10 years a killing off of a lot of subject to a lot of that kind of creativeness, and we're kind of excited because all these rates, how low they got, and there's going to be people that need. It always comes down to a problem, and you're solving somebody's problem. But if they got underlining debt service that is at a very low rate, we can get creative there as well and take advantage of those low rates. But.
Yeah. We have a lot of new investors kind of starting out. If you were, what advice would you give to the new investor?
So go out? Eddie Speed, in 1980, but with all your knowledge today, you got to take your knowledge with you. What would you do? Like what if you started with no connections? Yeah. I
think I proved a theory back then that I just told us about, right? It was that I was calling on these real estate investors and these home builders and these realtors. I didn't understand all that they understood. I just understood very distinctly how to solve one of their problems, right? And I think if you're a real estate investor today, you and I know that it's a hyper competitive market, and it's a little intimidating if you haven't been doing it before, and your competition are these guys that buy 200 houses a year.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And we know them. They exist. That's not a story. And so I would say that an angle like creative financing would put them at a terrific advantage compared to somebody that, in other words, they've got a different way to close a customer than anybody else is really. If you haven't been taught this, you don't know this. You don't accidentally know this. And so I think that the creative financing angle and the tax angle to it and all that stuff, I think a young person in the business would really kill it trying to go try it that way.
Nice. I'm going to take you a different direction and ask you, because we don't get too many.
I know where this is going.
Yeah, so we don't get a lot of people that, they work with their spouse, been involved. I know you started, right? It was a family.
Married 40 years, you said.
Yeah.
And,
so tell us the secret sauce. So, how have you guys worked together, been successful building your company together, and stayed married for 40 years?
Well, first of all, start out with a tolerant spouse.
I love that.
You guys know and understand it. In the early days, we just didn't have any money. And so Martha was kind of the office manager, and I was running the acquisition desk, and so we were just surviving, right? I would say that is not the best scenario in the world overall, right? You're just with each other too much, and work is going to have its hectics, and it's really easy for something that didn't go wrong with work to get into dinner that night, right? And so I think what we learned along the way is that we could do different things, be involved and do different things, but she's not my assistant, or she's not my operations person that I deal with all the time. So she had to go find the niche that was really what Note School teaches. And she has an office up here in our office, but I mean, I would say if we went to lunch 5 days in a week, we might mention work once. Just something that was happening. The rest of it is we just had to develop essentially a switch. And so that's worked good. And she is very tolerant. And, Martha's had a lot of influence of people because she teaches them that she teaches creative financing related to how you might do, retirement account type investing, and it would, in that type of investing, what's interesting is you got 2 young kids, and listen, you can do it with an IRA or a 401k or a solo or whatever, but you can do it just as easily with a health savings account or a Coverdell educational account. Those strategies will work. Essentially, maybe you're old like us or you're not, but the strategies still work the same.
Yeah, no, and she, that was another big takeaway from your 3-day event that I did. We did that same thing, and I actually get excited about it. That's any more today. That kind of stuff excites me, and so we did that for both of our kids, and they have the educational IRA account, and we've been flipping. But I also involve them in it, and so they get to see what's happening and try to. They're young; they don't quite understand all the nuances of it, but it's fun and yeah. But I think she did it's like a half day, right, at your event. So
Well, you guys have built an incredible business, and I'm in awe of both you and Martha. So
yeah, what's your? We always ask our guests, what's their next? So what is your next? What's your next 5 years? I know our good friend David Phelps wrote a book on it, but just tell us what's your next.
Well, our operations are pretty solid up here at this point, and I have some really significant people that help me run it to the point where I think I can not be here as much, and it's okay. So that's the first lesson that we all have to learn in business is don't own a business that owns you. And I think we all get caught up in that some because it's just hard not to. But then as we wake up and start reading ourselves out of that script, right? And so I think our next 5 years is going to be, I love it too much. It's not like I just wouldn't have any desire just to not be involved.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know. I like it too much. Die in the harness. Is that what they say? And if I didn't love it, I would have totally a different thing. Now, I understand free time and that, and I think we're working towards that, but definitely, not waking up and feeling like we're in the grind.
Yeah.
I think is a big key to it. So I think, there's 2 ways to look at it, right? I see some people that plan for what they're going to do at retirement, but not plan for how they're going to retire.
So
right?
True. Yeah.
And so I think what we've been focused on is plan how we're going to retire. And then we like a lot of things, travel and, just our kids. And so we got lots of stuff that we can fill that time with. We just been trying to figure out how we can do it, knowing that we're in a position where we're not making a risky retirement decision. So I don't know, work half-time maybe, 65% of the time. I don't know what that number is. I used to tell people when I was in my 30s that the great thing about working for our company is you only had to work half days. So
Yeah. Is that hard for you? Is that hard for you?
well, I mean, what I meant was 6 to 6 or 8 to 8.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. That's not what
I
I
don't
got.
prescribe that anymore, by the way. I don't prescribe that anymore.
Is it hard to shut off for you, or is it like, are you able to really shut it off?
No, it is,
Yeah.
and I have to keep my mind occupied or just kind of force myself to do it. But as I said, I don't. I'm fortunate. I think it's funny. Like, we didn't discuss this before we started the podcast today, right? I mean, this is just, it just comes out. I've heard this many times. And you kept talking about how fun the creative financing was and how much you enjoy it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, I mean, that's a pattern that I've noticed. And so people start really enjoying it. And it may allow you to work less because you're doing really good deals that have some very good profit in them.
Mm-hmm.
But it also means the time you're working, you don't feel like you're grinding.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Totally.
for me, I went to school for engineering, and so math always came very easy to me, and engineering. So to me, it's my way of like engineering a deal and the math part of it. And I think it's fun.
Yeah.
For other people, it's probably a nightmare, but for me, it's fun. But
And I just love talking to people.
she does the talking, and I engineer in the back. That's why we made a good team. Yeah.
That's two perfectly good things that you can apply with this business. Because if you don't talk to them, you're probably not going to get the deal you want. Tony.
So
Any current books that you're reading, or maybe your favorite book?
I think that there's a lot to be said. I love the Chris Voss book, Never Split the Difference.
Oh yeah, it's a good one.
And I think just overall, and of course, obviously he's had a giant impact in the real estate investor world because they're sitting at the kitchen table really with a customer that feels a whole lot like they're a hostage, right?
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form. And so anyway, that's a good book. I think that just makes people understand the psychology of the other side, right? Because, it's kind of what you heard me say earlier. I've seen so many people that come in there with a canned, I'm going to make a, terms offer with this. I'm going to pitch to the seller. He's going to carry terms for me. And the first thing I do is I sit down and I'm trying to get some truth serum in them. I'm trying to get them to just tell me what their real pain is so that I can back into something that would solve that pain.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you do, isn't it, Joni? You give them truth serum.
yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do.
So, and she's good at it too. So
I know she is.
5 minutes, 5 hours, whatever it takes, right?
So, well, how can we appreciate that today? And but I want people to get involved with you. I think you have a lot to offer people. So how can people get involved with Note School, with you?
And any events coming up? I know you'll be at Quest event here in Houston, but anything else that you have going on?
The best way to get started with us is I've got a nice little training, not a thick book, but a meaningful book about terms, and just a little webinar training that we do. And I'll send them to that first. I mean, people need to get a little bit of an understanding before I'd say, oh, just come to a 3-day class, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's great. I think we do a good job, but I think people have to kind of prepare for it, and they have to kind of, they'll learn better if they have a little base of knowledge to start. So that's just go to noteschool.com/get started. And that'll just take them to that's a pretty easy little path for us to do. Little reading material, little workshop, and it just kind of gives them a sense of what it could look like.
Nice.
Awesome.
And are you on any social, or is Note School? They can follow you?
Yeah. Yes, Note School definitely has a Facebook page and LinkedIn, and I would definitely encourage you guys to follow us, please. We do some fairly good podcasts on our side, particularly market updates and stuff that we do a lot of research for. So you guys do that, and we'll push out the information. I know on Eddie Speed and on the Note School.
Okay.
Then you can you can see about those podcasts and stuff. We have definitely done a lot of research, kind of read the tea leaves on the market.
Yeah.
And we share those pretty often on there.
Awesome. We'll put all that in the show notes so people can reach out and get involved with you and follow you. So thank you for today. We'll see you tomorrow at the Quest event, and looking forward to hearing you speak then. So thanks again for this time, and we'll see you all next week.
See ya, everyone.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Sean and Joni Wolfswinkle. Tons of entrepreneurial podcasts are out there. Talking. But Joni and Sean are living it every single day. Their portfolio now includes many franchises and medium-sized businesses. We talk about the trials and motivators of successfully running a business. Join us again soon for another podcast. But until then, reach out on the website at InsideTheWolf'sDen.com, on Facebook at Inside the Wolf's Den, on Instagram at Inside the Wolf Den. We'll see you again soon. This is Inside the Wolf's Den. We'll see you next time.